any of the other rookies. I mean, Zach Reach has had a solid year at Andretti Autosport, but not the results I think that one would have expected from the Group 1001 team. And Matthias Lace has been good in qualifying, but he hasn't been able to turn that qualifying pace into a solid race pace yet. So ultimately, you look at all the scenarios right now, and it's all about Robert Wickens at this point being the favorite as far as, Sunoco Rookie of the Year honors, if not being able to find a way to win in his very first season.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Will Power. Will Power's win at the Indianapolis 500. He's won multiple races, and he is, but he's never won the Indianapolis 500. He has won at Indianapolis, but he won both races in the month of May. Will Power is been a champion before. Will Power has did it all. He hit the pinnacle of his career, if you will, when he won the Indianapolis 500. Does he have another championship in him?
As far as Will Power, obviously. I mean, the thing is, though, is the bad luck going to start catching up with him again. The result at Texas certainly did not help his situation, but looking at the scenarios with the way things are playing out, obviously, if you're looking for a role of favoritism, the favoritism role is not with Will Power at this point. It's got to be unless he has a step back with Scott Dixon. I mean, he has only one finish outside the top 10 this season to date, and that's a tough resume to beat.
Let's talk a little bit about Scott Dixon. Scott Dixon was dominant both in Detroit and Texas. Scott Dixon is also trying to be another champion.
Good stuff, obviously, with Scott Dixon winning 4 titles and then looking ahead down the road, possibly number 5. And then, the guy's not even turned 40 yet, and he could still easily win 3 or 4 more championships and still be running at an advanced age. If not in IndyCar, he could be doing it in sports car. Obviously, he and Kanaan are running for Chip Ganassi again at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. So there's several avenues for Scott Dixon still to make a career for himself, I'd say, for at least the next decade.
Let's start talking about the rumors. And, it's not even the silly season yet, but one of the things that we're going to be talking about quite a bit over the next few months as we get into 2019, and that's McLaren bringing an IndyCar team. I tell you what, that's just opening up the doors that I think a lot of people want to see, and that's a full-time run with Fernando Alonso. McLaren, I tell you what, that could be a more than just a rumor, and I know Zach Brown really wants to get McLaren into IndyCar. Thoughts?
Well, right now they are having a nightmare in FIA, and while it's to be a shame to see one of the mainstays in Formula One go away, they need to find something and reinvent themselves because they have not gotten it done with Honda. They have been struggling equally with Renault this year. The question is now, would this just be an entry for Alonso, or would someone like a Stoffel Van Dorn join in the mix as well? Because I think if McLaren's going to make an investment, I don't think they'd enter just a single car. You'd think they'd enter at least 2 cars for a full season run like they do in Formula One.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's the common rule of thoughts. Is certainly Fernando Alonso is going to be the one to look for as well. So what do we learn from Texas going into Road America? Texas is one of those fast ovals, certainly like Indianapolis, and not to be Indianapolis, but certainly Texas is a fast track. So we've seen Indianapolis, we've seen Texas, we've seen these fast ovals. Obviously, we've got the road course coming up next at Road America. But these ovals really do show what these cars are made of. We've got a brand new car this year. What are your thoughts overall halfway through the season? Report card for the cars.
The car is great on the road courses. It's not so good on the ovals. It just seems like there is a big deal of loose or bad air that comes off of this car as opposed to the old car design, at least for now. And it is making things extremely difficult for, being able to overtake beyond the restart. And I think you saw that issue come up in a world of reality, both at Indianapolis and at Texas. So, if that's what IndyCar wants, that's what IndyCar is going to get. But you wonder if the fans for Indy and Texas are going to start staying away, knowing these events are not the action-packed dramas that we've had over the last several years. Potentially, that could be the case.
We got some action at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway this weekend. Obviously, that's the Legends race. Talk with us a little bit about that race.
Well, obviously, a lot of former Indy 500 drivers or drivers with Indy 500 experience are in some of those events, and a lot of old classic cars from the sports car eras and some of the other areas of racing, so that's always a good thing when the SVRA come up. Unfortunately, though, with even though, all the week, the NASCAR and Indy Car are off this week, but with Le Mans going on, it just doesn't, kind of gets overlooked a little bit as far as the significance it has with the racing and all that stuff and all the throwbacks. I mean, that's why I still play Indy 500 Evolution from time to time on my Xbox when I got a chance to, because that's always an interesting era with all these cars from, the 50s, 60s, 70s, and even some 80s and 90s versions.
Well, absolutely. I enjoy it. It's just a lot of fun to see some of the old cars out there and go at it. So we're going to just kind of go through a couple teams here. Let's go with Penske. Halfway through the season, what are your thoughts?
Great stuff of power. Just head scratcher on Newgarden suddenly struggling, and the struggle that Simon Pagenaud has had. Outside of his solid run at Texas, Pagenaud really hasn't done much this year. And as far as a championship contender, he's almost completely fallen off the radar as far as a championship contender. Now, it's not to say he's in danger of losing his ride by any means, mind you, but it's been an Simon Pagenaud-like season so far in 2018.
Chip Ganassi, we've been talking about Scott Dixon a couple times today already. Chip Ganassi halfway through the season.
Well, obviously, Dixon's going to be a good mainstay, and you were starting to wonder whether or not Ed Jones was going to keep his seat or was going to lose after 1 year because he had a very dismal start to the year. But he's starting to put some results together. He had a couple good runs at Detroit, a good run at Texas. If he can keep the momentum going, he may not be, high up there as far as a championship challenge, but ultimately it's been a decent bounce back for Ed Jones in his first year at Chip Ganassi.
Andretti, we've got Alexander Rossi, second and 334 points. Ryan Hunter-Reay's in fourth. Marco Andretti in 10th. Marco had a good run there in Indianapolis. Certainly he was fast in practice. Certainly Marco's seemed to have gotten a little bit of it figured out there at Indianapolis. And, of course, Zach Veach as well over there with Andretti Motorsports.
Well, Veach, I think, needs to improve his game just a little bit to be absolutely sure he's got a seat for next season, although I think his Group 1001 will keep him good for 2019. The jury's going to be out whether or not he can improve in that season if he continues to struggle this year. And then, obviously, solid years from Rossi, who is becoming the main challenger for the championship as far as who they have on that roster. Another good year for Ryan Hunter-Reay despite his advanced age, and you look at the other scenarios in play for them. Things are, Marco's having a better season than he normally has had the last few years, but I think there's still a few areas where Marco needs to up his game if he's to become, a potential winner again on the IndyCar circuit, if not championship contenders like his fan base would prefer that he would be, considering he is a member of the famous Andretti family.
Ray Hall, Letterman, Legnan Racing, obviously Honda engine that they're running in the United MyJack. And I tell you what, from a personal standpoint, from the show standpoint, I love what Graham Rahal and them are doing with Turns for Troops and doing what they're doing for the troops as well. But Graham Rahal, they've also got Tomoko Soto, and Graham Rahal's in 6 and Soto's in 13. Soto's kind of been having some struggles this year.
Yeah, it's kind of tough to get the job done when you don't have the equipment like Sato enjoyed a year ago when he was with Andretti Autosport, won the Indy 500. Graham Rahal's had a decent year. He's 6th in the points right now, but like I mentioned, to be in Tyson Laudenschlager mentioned the day before the Indy 500, are they spreading themselves too thin by running two cars? They've had several decent weekends, but I wouldn't say the great weekends they enjoyed last several years when they were a single-car operation.
So we talked a little bit about these guys earlier. Schmidt-Peterson Motorsports in their Honda as well. Robert Wickens in 7th, and James Hinchcliffe back at 11th. And as we mentioned, Hinchcliffe, mayor of Hinchtown, is showing some signs of improvement. But halfway through the season, what are your thoughts on Schmidt-Peterson Motorsports?
Wickens is now the factor, and obviously I didn't think I was going to say that at the start of the year, but he is the factor right now. He really needs to get going, though, and make the most of these road course events and get results if he wants to become, the first rookie series champion in the major North American Open Wheel Series since Sebastian Bourdais pulled the feet off in Champ Car, I believe, in 2002 or 2003. So it's still possible, but he really needs to start getting some results and then start getting some help with some bad results for those ahead of him on the standings.
DCR, DL Coin Racing, Honda, they've got Sebastian Bourdais, like I said, had a fantastic run there in Indianapolis. Zachary DeMello as well. But Fittipaldi, I'm sorry, we know he's still injured. They hope that he'll be back for Sonoma. And they got Ferracucci as well. Man, go ahead.
Ferrucci's look potential. I mean, you understand why he's an F1 tester. He had a decent performance at Detroit, unlucky to get the results. I think that could be one guy. If somebody's looking forward, if talk about McLaren maybe going to a two-car team, maybe that's one guy they try to go after for a teammate to Alonso maybe. And then you look at DCR, Sebastian Bourdais, since qualified well at Indy. He hasn't done much to, satisfy his position. And then obviously with that revolving door now at the second seat after Pietro Fittipaldi's testing crash at Spa-Francorchamps, that's really put that second team with a driver that wasn't expecting to run some of the events he is currently running at this point, like, for instance, the Ovals with Zachary Clayman DeMille.
AJ Foyt Racing, TK, Tony Kanaan in 14th and Matthew Least in 19th.
Obviously, TK, with the ovals left on the schedule, I believe either Gateway or Pocono, he will certainly be a factor for a victory. Beyond that, though, he hasn't showed the potential, I think, to be a challenger on the road races. And Lace looked good at the Open in St. Pete, then had the early crash, and like Cadot, has also been a non-factor when we've gone to the road courses. So I don't expect much from these guys when we get to Road America, which is a shame considering their sponsor, ABC Supply, is based in Wisconsin.
Our man here in Indianapolis, Mr. Ed Carpenter Racing. Mr. I can get the pole in Indianapolis, but cannot win the big race in Indianapolis. Of course, he's got Simon Piggott, himself, Ed Carpenter, and Jordan King as well. And Ed Carpenter's in 20th. They're not really making much of a move in the standings. Really disappointing because I know Ed Carpenter has a lot of fans, myself included. He's from right here in Indianapolis as well, liked by a lot of people, but just can't seem to get over that hump.
It's not from lack of trying. It's just, Spencer Piggott has just not been the competitive form that he was when he joined as a part-time driver running the road courses a couple years ago. Jordan King, I think, is still learning the game and learning not to be too aggressive. I think that's been his biggest bugaboo. He had the early crash out at the Indy Car Grand Prix, for instance. And Ed Carpenter, I could not understand how he couldn't get it done in Texas, then gets absolutely torn apart on Twitter, people saying he needs to retire. Ed Carpenter, folks, finished second at the Indianapolis 500 and won the pole. Does that sound like a guy that is past his prime? I mean, Indianapolis, the big event of the year, and he's a contender to win that race. That doesn't mean he does not deserve to run, the occasional race here and there because he has a controversial accident with another driver at Texas, in this case, Robert Wickens.
Well, absolutely. And, we'll push a pause button there real quickly on Ed Carpenter because Danica Patrick did race for Ed Carpenter in the Indianapolis 500, obviously, to finish her career. She had a great car. She qualified well. A lot of people had high hopes, but then Danica did what Danica does. Danica did what Danica does. Danica did what everybody knew Danica would do. Danica did what we knew what Danica would do. Danica was Danica at the Indianapolis 500.
She was, and I think she may have just wanted it a little bit too much. That maybe caused the, over-aggression in the accident and the frustration. She couldn't make up ground early. But unfortunately, not the way you want to end your career. But, again, remember Arie Luyendyk's final 500 in 1999. He crashed out of that race as well.
Real quickly, Carlin Racing, you got Charlie Campbell in 17th and Max Chilton 21st.
If not for Chilton's relationship with Carlin and considering that he drove for them in British Formula 3 and then Indy Lights, I'd say he's on the hot seat right now. He has been a complete non-factor this year. Charlie Kimball, surprisingly, is carrying this team when I thought Chilton would be the one that would have to be the main standard bearer, considering his performance last year at the Indy 500. But Chilton has been a non-existent factor since the word go when we started the season at St.